ultimately, it's the people, the most vulnerable people in the most vulnerable communities who are most frequently approached with somebody with a clipboard and a consultation process and a set of tick boxes. And they're most frequently asked to participate in a democratic consultation process. And those voices are seldom actually listened to, and they're seldom actually valued. So what the researchers are finding is that those people are more and more disinclined to engage because they don't trust that there's going to be an outcome that's right for them. So that's the situation, and there you are in the middle of it, like the good fairies, and this is what you are being asked to do. More and better for less. You recognise this? I see some smiles out there. How you manage to smile in the midst of all this, I cannot imagine. You've got to improve people's engagement, their well-being, and their resilience. You've got to ensure that you work with prevention and early action so the crisis doesn't actually occur. And you've got to ensure sustainability of your projects and value for money and social value. That's all. Actually, that is an extraordinary ask. It's a challenge that's so big that it is amazing to me that any of you are still standing, let alone still doing it. But co-production, I believe, is the solution. And okay, I am biased, but I'm biased on the basis of evidence, and I'll share some of that evidence with you today. And I'm not underestimating the difficulty. It needs transformational change at organisational level, and it needs time, but it is possible. Okay. What co-production can do, and is proven to do at its best, and it's not always at its best, is, oh, sorry, this is very small, isn't it? You're a great distance away, so I will read it through. It improves participation and genuine engagement in spades. It leads to renewed confidence amongst participants, which helps them to become empowered, helps them to both have a voice and then insist that that voice is actually listened to. It improves people's health and well-being. And there are now, as I'm sure you know, ways of measuring well-being that have been established by the New Economics Foundation. So we can actually prove this is happening. We don't have to just say, I think they're happier. It leads to more active and more connected individuals with increased social capital. Again, unless we do that for people or help people to achieve increased social capital, once the professional moves out of the picture, then they're going to fall again into a state of vulnerability. So that's an essential one. It leads to stronger, more cohesive and more equal communities where everybody is playing their part. It leads to ownership, which improves sustainability. People actually feel that the projects or the innovations or the enterprises are theirs, and often they set them up themselves. And that all means that services themselves are more relevant and more effective, because you're working not in a crisis situation, but in a situation where people are empowered, people are working with you. Co-production is the ultimate in partnership working. And that leads to value for money, including social value. What do you think of it so far? Actually, how many of you are doing co-production as far as you're aware?
Can we have a definition of?
Yeah, I'm coming to that, yes, okay. And then I'll ask again. I was keeping that, so you get more and more excited, yeah? It's not just me who says co-production is fantastic. The Scottish Government have decided to turn to co-production totally. So they're rolling co-production out across the statutory services, the third sector, health, social care, housing, communities. In London, the Social Care Institute for Excellence is going Copro. I met with the woman who runs NSPCC across the 4 counties yesterday, and she said, NSPCC is going Copro. Cynnal Cymru, stay in Wales, is going Copro. So it's happening everywhere. But I thought I would try to think of what was the least fluffy, the least like-us organisation that I could, and see what they thought about Copro. So I thought the least like-us organisation in the entire history of the universe was probably the Cabinet Office. I may be doing them a disservice, but I just had this image of the Cabinet Office as not being people like us. Anyway, this is what the Cabinet Office said last year. The potential prize of co-production is enhanced, more cohesive communities, services that are more efficient and responsive, and increased opportunity and influence for individuals. All right, what is it? This is the definition. And when I show it to people in the third sector, there's a sense, well, we're doing this. This is back to the future. This is how I work. And yes, it is. What's starting to change, however, is that the statutory sector are being asked to come on board. So you've made the lead, and they're being asked to follow you. And once you get both partners working together in this way, then something quite extraordinary starts to happen. The other thing that's starting to happen, I think, is that this is being taken seriously. So the bits in bold, delivering public services through equal and reciprocal relationships between professionals, people using services, their families and communities. That's the definition by the New Economics Foundation. Incidentally, these slides will be circulated to everybody, so you don't need to take notes unless you particularly want to. That definition, although it seems simple in one way, and although it's the way that you intuitively work because of who you are, it's actually getting harder and harder to do it, because the starting point is an unequal one. We start with the service user, who is defined either by us, or by society at large, or by the government, or even by themselves, as the person who has a lack, or a need, or a problem. Indeed, often the person who is a problem, increasingly in our society. And they are passive, and they are recipients of the largesse and the expertise of the paid professional, who comes in, however nice they are, however empathetic they are, however well-meaning they are, they come in, try to solve that problem for the person, and then they go away again. So it's very, very hard for an equal relationship to be set up there. The whole context, the whole system is increasing that inequality. And we've reached a situation, haven't we, with things like domiciliary care, where all the service provider is able to do is to give 15 minutes to somebody. I watched a video the other day of a domiciliary care worker, obviously a really caring person, and she was practically in tears at her inability to actually meet the needs of the service user because the system is stopping her doing it. So, this sounds straightforward. This, I know, is the way you work or want to work, but it's much more difficult to put together, much more difficult to make it happen in reality. When it does happen in reality, what's being asked for now from governments and from people like the Social Care Institute for Excellence isn't that it's just a way of you working as frontline staff with that individual. It's a whole systems approach that's being needed now. So that's the other change from the past, I think. We are back to the future in terms of values, but the application of those values is very different. So it's across everything. It's across commissioning, design, delivery, and evaluation of outcomes. Every single thing that the service provider does is done co-productively. I was up in Scotland last November visiting the Scottish Government's co-production team. They've got co-production champions up there, and they're really going for it. And we went to Midlothian Council, who are a co-production council, and they told us about the most extraordinary piece of co-commissioning, which they did. They had to revisit or re-establish or rebuild the residential homes for 70 adults with learning difficulties. And they decided to co-commission with all 70 adults and their carers and their families. So they co-commissioned with a group of about 140 people. And not only was it highly successful, but the outcome, according to the people in the council, was better than they ever could have expected in terms of the actual buildings, but also they only had one single complaint in terms of people moving. And when you think of 70 vulnerable people moving to new accommodation, normally it would cause mayhem. But it was co-produced, co-commissioned, and everybody was part of it. And also what happened at the end of that is that the people with learning difficulties themselves, their confidence grew, they were valued, they felt their expertise was being utilised in order to help this process forward. And it changed them, so they decided that, for example, the way their daycare centre was operating wasn't good enough, so they changed that entirely. Some of them have become co-production champions and mentors in the community to help other people get engaged and so on. So it's changed everything, yeah? And it's delivered a great outcome for the council. So how does these sound to do? There are examples out there of successes in doing it this way. And what co-production aims for is more than the delivery of a service. What co-production is aiming for is shared power, shared responsibility. It's trying to put in place a more equal society, which will obviously benefit all of us. co-production principles, again, this is how you work. Yeah? So co-production is delivered simply by adhering hard and fast to these principles. First of all, you value all participants and accept that everybody has something to bring to the table. Everybody has some sort of expertise. And that includes, I know there are often difficulties when the statutory sector and the third sector are working together, because the statutory sector often has the big budgets and often sort of takes the lead in the way things are going to be done. It's not necessarily a partnership. So it's valuing everybody, whether they're professional to professional conversations or professional to community conversations. Secondly, building on their strengths. It's really important for sustainability that you don't just go in and solve the problem, but you actually look at the whole context. It's a very holistic approach to build people's capabilities. And again, build the capabilities of the professionals as well. So it's a very generous approach. You share what you know and you help each other. Developing peer support networks, obviously essential as well, so that eventually the professional can start to step back and the project or the innovation is sustainable in its own right and starts to go off in all sorts of other directions, as with the example of Midlothian. Again, everything is based on equality and reciprocity. Reciprocity means sharing. You give and you take. You give a commitment, you give your ideas, you give your expertise, and then you can take things from other people. So it's very much a shared experience. And then, again, what you're trying to do, and this is a bit of jargon, and I'm not a professional, so apologies if it really irritates you, but for me, it resonates. What you're trying to do is to be facilitators of change rather than people just delivering services. And that's a switch, I think. It's not such a big switch for the third sector, but it's often a very big switch, say, for NHS. Not that I'm suggesting that we should all become brain surgeons. It's not that. Okay, so that's it. All right so far? Yeah? Good-o. So here's some proof of the pudding. I've asked people to make big signs if I go on too long, because I do tend to go on too long. And what I would like to happen is for there to be a chance for people to have some questions or some conversation about it at the end. So I may have too many examples here. If I'm starting to go over, getting close, can you make signs at me? Okay, four case studies to show you. I could have chosen from hundreds. There's so much of this going on, small scale, big scale. Often it's not called co-production, but this is actually what it is. Three of them are from Wales. One is from England. That's Connecting Communities. It's happening now in 18 communities in England and Scotland. The reason I've chosen to pick that one is because that's been very, very thoroughly evaluated by Exeter University. So we have a lot of data about it, a lot of evidence, really. And it's been running since 1998, so the sustainability issue has been proven as well. Okay, so Connecting Communities is an approach. It's a community development approach based on co-production. And it started in 1998 in the Beacons Estate in Falmouth. If you look at Connecting Communities or Beacons Estate, but also I'll send these links so you can see them. There's a lot of information on the web about it. Okay, the Beacons Estate was known as the Beirut of Falmouth. It was a desperate place. Burnt out cars, excrement through letterboxes, underage drinking, antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, drug abuse. It was a devastatingly awful place to live. And the statutory sector had almost entirely withdrawn. The voluntary sector had given up on it. Nobody was helping them. And they felt that they'd just been left to their own devices, which made everything worse. There was one extraordinary woman called Hazel Stutley, who was a health visitor on that estate, working with families, particularly working with families who were dealing with domestic abuse and childcare issues and so on and so forth. She decided that it couldn't go on like this and something had to change. So she managed to get a tiny handful of residents to work with her. And when I say a tiny handful, I mean like 5 or 6. That's all she could get from this big estate. And they went round and they knocked on every single door in the community. And they asked people if they would come to what they called a listening event, which is a term we all know now, but in 1998, a listening event, sort of noddy and biggy land. Nobody knew what it was. But they did manage to get a lot of people to come to it. And then Hazel asked the statutory services and the voluntary services, everybody who was or should have been connected to that community, she asked them to come too. And she said they must come, but they mustn't speak. They must only listen, and they must listen with all their hearts and souls, because she knew that unless there was some trust, there was some appreciation from the tenants that they were being listened to, nothing else would happen. That was a starting point. It's still going. It's a residents-led association, which the statutory sector and the voluntary sector and everybody else is invited to join. It's amazingly powerful. It's completely turned that whole community around. And I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. But also, the system, the way of doing it has now been formalised as connecting communities. It's happening in 18 other communities across England and Scotland. And people from the original Bacon's estate are being asked to go and visit other communities to mentor and advise them. So they're actually being, you can imagine the growth in self-esteem that entails. They've also managed to fundraise, with help, but nonetheless it was the Residents Association that did this, fundraise £2.2 million to have the environment improved and the homes made more energy efficient. They've been extraordinary. Exeter University looked at this project over a 3-year period, and it looked at the various deprivation indices, and these are some of them, and these are the outcomes of a co-produced collective engagement with people. So overall crime rate down 50%, and these have all been sustained. Yeah? Unemployment unbelievably down 71%. Educational attainment up 100%. All of these figures, miraculous though they are, it's the stories behind them, I think, that are so astonishing. You know that if educational attainment goes up and unwanted teenage pregnancy goes down, it's a sign that people's sense of self has changed. Their aspirations have changed. They've started to believe in themselves. So the statistics tell us a lot, but it's the stories behind it, I think, that are so profound. And talking of the people behind, the stories behind it, they now have, I think, 33 or 34 community groups operating that they've set up themselves. Each time I look at their website, they're bored, so I can't keep up with them. But one of the most extraordinary is a dance group for young people, which is called TR14ers, TR14ERS. Do look them up, they've got a website. They're called after their postcode, and they've named themselves after their postcode because they say on their website they used to be ashamed of it, and now they're really proud of where they come from. And that alone, you think, whoa! Over 1,000 young people have gone through the training and the dance groups, and they dance all over the UK, and they've danced for royalty, and they've danced in front of an NHS conference. They've got 27 dance leaders or dance teachers who've been drawn from the community and trained within that community, and they run the thing, and it's extending out into other communities now. Sort of side effects, which are not really side effects. The young people who've got involved, they've become generally more fit, their diets are better, underage drinking has decreased, they've stopped smoking, asthma has dropped, their educational attainment has gone up. It's really changed things for them. But what I found the most profound, and I'm constantly moved and excited by all this, but this was a really big moment. This is on their website. The young people have got their own website for their own dance group. Through dance, we can change ourselves, others, and the community of which we are part. They understand that it's not just a dance group they're going to. They understand that they're part of making a huge change in their community. And again, how empowering that must be. So that's that one. And Exeter University also looked at savings. Because of prevention, because of early action, because they're getting to people before the crisis absolutely hits. Yeah? They started to try and work out how much they might have saved. And this is a really difficult one to do because you don't actually know how many people will have a stroke if you hadn't gone in with your co-production ideas. So it's a difficult one. Nonetheless, they've given it their best shot. They reckon for every pound spent in that community, between 3.8 and 6.4 pounds are saved. And these are great statistics. I think the difficulty is that it takes years for that to come through. And most commissioning processes want results now, don't they? So that's the shift that we need to make in Wales so that our commissioners buy in to this way of doing things and give us the time to get it right. They also suggested to the local authority in Falmouth that if they did this process, if they undertook co-production community development across 3 neighbourhoods over 3 years, they'd make up about £1.5 million in savings. And I think that's the great thing about this particular case study, is it's got different levers for different people. I mean, the levers for you, I'm sure, are about people, but the levers for other people are about money and about those indices of deprivation. So it's a really good one to utilise. The others I'm going to tell you about don't have that background of evidence, but they did happen. The evidence is still there. How am I doing for time? Right, should be fine. Okay, Bronavon Community Housing. I don't know if you know this organisation. It's a mutual. That's the other thing. Co-production can be delivered through any means. It can be a community development model via mutuals, via social enterprises, via time banks. Time banks are a fantastic way of producing co-production. It can be done any way you like, social co-op, so it's very, very flexible. Bronavon Community Housing is a mutual. They had a number of very significant problems. One was antisocial behaviour, generally from young people. One was the lack of intergenerational relationships. So older people were frightened of young people on the estate, and young people tended to just ignore the older people or were disrespectful of them. And young people weren't getting involved in the organisation, even though there were lots of ways in which they could. So Bronavon had the extraordinary idea of going to a young people's hostel where kids who'd been in care were living. And they said to these young people, would you help us to solve these problems? And so some of the young people said yes, here they are, left their cotton socks, and they were put into small groups. Bronavon stepped back, and then a third sector charity who works with young people came in to support those young people. So they mentored them, and they gave them advice and training in order to teach them how to do research, what sort of questions to ask, what to do with the data when they got the data back, how to put this together, how to make a business case, how to cost it, and how to do a presentation. And ultimately, I think there were 3 groups of young people, and they did fully costed business plans, which they presented to the Bronavon board. And the best of those ideas have gone forward into implementation now, with support from the young people themselves who are still involved in it. Again, it's not just that Bronavon started to get answers to its problems, it's all the other things that happened. So education attainment, these young people were often young people who dropped out of school, essentially. They dropped back in again. Some of them have got apprenticeships with Bronavon. Their sense of self has improved enormously. There were sort of quotes from them that are very simple quotes. One of the girls said, I didn't think I could do this, but I did. That's changed her life, doesn't it? So it's a win-win, really. And it really speaks to the potential that we all have to be more than we are at the moment. Co-production actually seems to be able to work anywhere. There's an extraordinary project which has been ongoing in Swansea for several years now, and the report is out on it, with My Life Cymru and OPAM, which is the Older People and Ageing Research Network in Swansea University. It's led by the most fabulous bloke called Nick Andrews, who was the Older People's Officer for Swansea Council, is now seconded to Swansea University, and he decided that, he's an ex-GP, he felt that the way we work with people in dementia care homes is just not adequate. He calls it the hotel model, where people are serviced, so they're brought things, but there's no relationship there at all. And in fact, the risk factors mean that staff are told not to hug people or not to have relationships with them. He decided to go for a Copro approach in dementia care homes, and what he meant by that was that everybody would be helped to be the best they can be. This wonderful quote from an old lady, who wants to enable me to be as much as I want, as much as I can, as much as I should, right now and every tomorrow until the day I die. That's what his project set out to do, to try and maximise everybody's potential within those circumstances. And he decided to face off the whole risk-averse culture to front it. So the homes have a culture which he calls Cwtch and Wander. And that's what they say they do. This is a Cwtch and Wander dementia care home. Not only does it make the lives of the people, the residents, much happier, much better, it also improves the lives of the people who are working there. Because, again, it goes back to their values, it goes back to the caring people they are and they want to be. And they're free to do that. But also, there are cost savings. People are enabled to stay in the care home and not go to the more expensive residential. What's the next one up? Whatever the next one up is, they're enabled to stay here and be happy with the rest of their lives. And obviously their families and their friends, it makes them happier too, because it really works. So these are 2 old ladies giving a head massage and a hand massage to one of the members of staff. And it's not a posed photograph. This is the atmosphere there now. And finally, this is the last example. How many of you know about Blaengarw Creation Development Trust? Can you put your hands up? Now, this is typical of Wales. If we can find a bushel, we will go and hide our light under it. If we can't find a bushel, we'll still find somewhere to hide our light. Yeah? We are rubbish at celebrating the good things we do. And I've just had a conversation earlier with a couple of you suggesting that some of the things that are happening in Carmarthen at the moment are absolutely fantastic. They're radical, they're exciting, and I think we ought to have you as a flagship project that we start telling the rest of Wales about. That's an aside. Okay, the reason we should all know about this is that Blaengarw it's a time bank. You probably know Blaengarw itself, an old mining town, and once the mines closed, everything closed. So tremendous problems with antisocial behaviour and drug abuse and breakdown of families and no work. I mean, they sunk into despair. And 2000, they set up a time bank there, which has grown and grown. It's now the largest active citizen network in Europe. That's why we should know about it. And it's a Welsh model. And it's completely wonderful. So based on time banking, based on this exchange of credits, every year, formally through the time bank, 30,000 hours are shared by the community to the community. That's formally. They reckon at least another 30,000 hours of volunteering and sharing goes in informally, because it's just become the way they do things in Blaengarw. There was a question earlier about using resources. So everybody is involved in Blaengarw. I think if you're not, you sort of get blackballed and have to leave and go and live in, I don't know, Upper Cumtorsig. So everybody's involved. So the rugby club is involved, the leisure centre is involved, the working men's hall is involved, the private sector, public sector, statutory sector. Everybody's in on it. They share resources, they share photocopiers, they share kit, they share rooms, and it's rebuilt that community. And I think one of the real signs of that is that Blaengarw used to, when it was a thriving mining town, it used to have an annual carnival, which was the big event, and they had marching bands and choirs and so on. And since the time bank really took off, they've re-established the carnival there. And it's a real sign of the pride they have in the place. You know? So tell people about it and tell people about what you're doing. Get rid of bushels. I think that's going to be my rallying cry for the next year. Get rid of bushels. Okay, so just 5 minutes about the wider context. Co-production in Wales. A little song. Co-production is bursting out all over. I used to be a teacher, and when I was doing my teacher training, they said to me, it doesn't really matter if what you say is interesting or not interesting. If you can find a way to make them remember you, then that's enough. Because they'll say, I can't remember what she was talking about, but wasn't she great? You know? So, dancing. So, you might forget all of this, but you'll remember. There was that mad woman who danced. Right, co-production is busting out all over. Everybody is getting involved, and it's getting to the stage when it's more than lip service, I believe. I was born an optimist, but this seems to be the case. So all sorts of people are involved. The gorgeous WCVA are now really strongly putting their hearts and souls behind co-production. And one of the ways they're doing it is via this I Matter, We Matter conversation, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. So everywhere, statutory sector, third sector, charities, individuals, politicians, ministers, the Welsh Government itself, it's starting to permeate. People are getting really interested in this, and they're starting to feel that given the crisis that we're in, which is going to get worse, this is the solution. So if you feel that way, you're not alone. In fact, you're in the vanguard of this. You are our revolutionaries. You're at the barricades already, but the government is following up quickly behind. Some of the things that are happening right now, writing co-production principles into the legislation. I said that was one of the aims of all of this together. And Mark Drakeford, who chairs the Committee of the Social Services and Wellbeing Bill, is an absolute co-production champion. Absolute co-production champion. He spoke at the first All in This Together event that I put on. He was at an event yesterday, which was to feedback from the Scottish visit. He wanted to come on the Scottish visit, but he was kept behind after he booked his flight by business in the Assembly. But He is doing his very best to get co-production written into that policy document in a way which is unambiguous and inspirational, in a way that means that people can't just tick box it like citizens' voice, you know, or participation, yeah, done that, in a way that actually is meaningful, that can help you do your jobs in the way you want to do your jobs. I've got a meeting with him and his committee and cooperatives, Wales Cooperatives, WCVA, Children in Wales and Disability Wales, a roundtable discussion about how we can help to make this happen. So we're nearly there. We're at a tipping point. And the idea is that is followed through with the environment and sustainability bills, housing bills, so it becomes the norm. It becomes the way we do things in Wales. Co-produced commissioning, that's a biggie. But there is an understanding, and again, the more we talk about it, the more we say, yes, this is possible, the more we show the politicians and the government examples of this in practice, then the more possible it becomes. So I've been talking to Welsh Government people about the Scottish visit, about Midlothian. Also, they're doing co-production commissioning in Lambeth. Cardiff Council started co-production commissioning with young people, and Bernardo is working together on that. So it's starting to get through that this is an essential element. If they keep asking you to deliver to targets and to deliver to outputs, you can't do it. It has to change at the top. And there is, things are shifting. Outcomes-based evaluation. I'm sure you've all looked at the national outcomes framework that's being proposed. This is the key. In Scotland, they have outcomes-based evaluation, which is called talking points. And talking points has become the motor for co-production, if you like. So essentially, the idea is, I'm sure you've all, apologies, I'm sure I'm teaching grannies to suck eggs here, but I'm not quite sure how much everybody knows. You've probably all seen the diagram of inputs and process and outputs and outcomes. And the inputs are ingredients, and the process is the cooker, and the output is the cake, and the outcome is a smiley face. Yeah, you've seen that one. And the shift from outputs, targets, how many, how often, to outcomes, what does it do for people's well-being? How does it make people feel? Does it make them happier? Does it make them more fulfilled? That shift is the key. And so what they've done in Scotland, their national framework for outcomes, very much like the WCVA I Matter, We Matter conversations, has found 15 years worth of research. They've found 15 answers to that question. What makes you feel good? What makes your well-being increase? What makes you feel happy in life? They've got a framework for everybody, a special framework for carers, and a framework for people living in residential homes, because they change slightly. But generally speaking, all humanity answers in similar ways to those questions. So being safe, being connected, not being isolated. It's the same things. And in terms of process, everybody says they want to be listened to. They want to be valued. They want to be respected. They want to be able to make a difference. So it's very consistent. And what we need to do with the national frameworks in Wales is to get them to accept something like the talking points model. And the talking points model isn't just used to assess people, it's also used to determine what targets you're aiming for. So the outcomes the old people say, or the young people say, those are the outcomes that everybody works towards, and those are the outcomes that you're evaluated against. And what you've learned from that journey goes back into policy and strategy. So it's a complete circle in Scotland, which is tied together. And in the last week, Alliance for Citizen-Directed Support in Wales, on their website, they put up a thing about the outcomes and about talking points being central to that. They put in a paper to government, to the committee, asking for talking points to be the national framework, if you like. Brain gone. There have been 3 organisations just in the last week that have asked the government to do this. And one of the main things I'm going to be saying tomorrow is, please, can we have a talking points type equivalent at the heart of this, which will be the mechanism which drives co-production, which drives a values-based public service. Projects like Making the Connections, they're doing the same thing. It's a co-production project. So more and more you're hearing this happening. And I had 3 meetings last week with different people about co-production, everybody inspired by it. 3 meetings this week. It's everywhere now. I think we are going to make a change. We are going to have a revolution in Wales, and it's going to be fab. And that's what we're aiming for. Back to Nye Bevan. I love a bit of vision. I think in Wales we do like a bit of vision, do we? So, Aneurin Bevan said, empowerment means collective action to lift us all together. That's what co-production can do. And if we all work together on it, we can make it happen. Particularly you, because I just do the talking. You do the doing. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's very easy to get people on the ground operating in this way because it's how you work. Getting conviction at the top is much tougher. And that's one of the things that, all in this together, I should explain, is me and my mate Noreen at my kitchen table, right? So it's not a big organisation, it's not funded. Nonetheless, over the past year, through all of this together, we've been trying to have those conversations and trying to shift them upwards. With Mark Drakeford's help, I must say, and also with help from other people within the Welsh Government. Yesterday we had a meeting which was to talk about what we learned from Scotland, and at that meeting, it was a meeting invitation only, and who we targeted was sort of the next level up. So not quite the top of not quite the directors of organisations, but quite high level. And what we asked for at the end of that meeting was for people who were there to volunteer to set up another meeting, which would be a strategic meeting, at which we get the next level involved. So that's what I'm doing. I'm finding any way I can. And what I have discovered is that if you find one person, they often are networked in some way to somebody much higher up. It might only be one person much higher up, but they can find a way in. That's what I'm doing. If we all started to do that, so we all started just to put a bit of pressure on to get people involved, I think it would start to happen much more quickly. But even so, even just with all in this together, doing it, and obviously support from people like the WCVA who are doing it in all directions all the time, it is starting to permeate. And one of the things that we're also doing with all in this together, and we've discussed this with Mark Drakeford, we've got an open letter to government, open letter to the First Minister, which we're intending to send in March at the right moment. And Mark has said he'll ensure that Carwyn gets it and reads it. And it's asking that co-production principles are placed at the heart of government. And we've got, I think, 168 signatures from over 100 organisations so far. Please join in. You can sign as a citizen, as a professional, as an organisation, in any way you like. We've also got letters of support coming in from the Scottish Government, coming in from America, where Edgar Kahn, who was the person who started co-production, really, amazing man, founding father, he sent us in a letter of support. New Economics Foundation supporting it, Social Care Institute for Excellence supporting it. So we're doing everything we can to say this is already out there and it works, so it's worth looking at. I don't actually have the answer, but I know that if we all work together in that way, it's going to filter up. And in a way, the crisis is a real help, isn't it? Because they know they can't go on like this. A lot of people who were at the meeting yesterday were from the statutory sector, and that interests me, that there's a real shift there. So Aneurin Bevan Health Board, they're saying, we can't operate like this anymore. We've got to start working in the way that third sector are working, really. And people in social care are saying, we're going to be amalgamated. That's the other nice thing. The amalgamation of health and social care, there's a deputation going up, including some ministers, to Scotland to visit the Scottish Government Joint Improvement Team who do co-production, to ask them how are they integrated. And they integrated very much around using this talking points outcome. So that was the glue that held it together. So if that deputation goes up there and comes back with that information, again, it's starting to build.
But it seems to me that co-production, it's another term. Now, one could as easily use a term like collaboration, and that becomes, the big buzzword. But it may be that collaboration was already being limited in some way, and you had to come up with a co-word, and co-production, was a structure that you could inject all sorts of other good things into. Because it seems to me that, this isn't new, that the guiding principles, if you tear out the fluff, the core of that is about you know, whatever words you use, like collaboration, engagement, respect, dignity, fraternity, brotherhood, and so on and so on. I mean, any number of words, if you like, that capture the essence of what it's about. But I think what you've managed to do is to build a campaign around those central principles. So it's a bit like, if you like, you know, 2,000 years ago, Christianity was the big thing. It swept across continents. Other people have come up with, you know, slogans and big ideas, you know, big society or whatever it is. Now, the big society hasn't caught on, but clearly it was meant to embrace some of these principles. But in fairness to you and your co-productionists, you know, if this gains momentum and becomes the new wave that can transform society and public sector, you know, that's fine. But we shouldn't get carried away with the idea that it's intrinsically new. It's intrinsically, you know, essential. It's about human beings, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're
it's about
absolutely
respecting
right,
human beings and working, you know, properly, collaboratively, or whatever the words are. So, you know, I think I respect the campaign, the missionary zeal, and I can see that it's going to, you know, develop and capture the public sector and lots of organizations that you've mentioned, and that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, the outcomes will be positive, whether it's co-production or whatever. But I'm happy to go with co-production if that's the word that captures, you know, the mood of the moment.
Yeah. You know, I think that's such a good point, and obviously I didn't invent co-production, and it came out of, I think, well, it came out of the United States, and it's based on a certain theory about a core economy and a money economy, so there's a whole background and history to it. And most people who work in this way have real problems with the term. I mean, words are constantly tripping us up, aren't they? So we decide that citizen voice is the thing, and then that gets, people don't trust it anymore, and they think this is just a notion, this is just another bright idea, and so that gets put to one side. We're going to run out of vocabulary soon, and so I think co-production is a rubbish word, but what I do believe in, and it's really what you're saying, is the principles that underpin it. I think it's more than collaboration, because collaboration doesn't necessarily mean that you have equal partnerships. You could get a collaboration between a senior partner and a junior partner. And what co-production has at its heart is more than that. It's that equality. And also that desire to build the capacity of everybody who's part of that partnership so that they can grow within it. And again, collaboration, I saw a formula once for this, that collaboration and the big society are X plus Y equals XY. And co-production is X plus Y equals Z, or ABCDE. And so the feeling is that what comes out of co-production is much more than the outcome of the collaboration itself. So, yes, I am uneasy with the term, and also you can't use it adjectively, which is a real pain. You can't say I am a co-productive organisation, etc. And yes, it incorporates things like empowerment and citizen voice and engagement and participation and all those other things that we've been told are the key to the future. I think the thing is to, as you said, not be put off by the terminology, but actually see if the principles that underlie it can work for you, practically as well as in terms of one's sort of value space. Anyone else? If I may, if the organisers say that's okay, I will circulate, as well as some links about this and about all this together, I will send for circulation information about the open letter and how you can sign it. And if you felt you were able to, and to get other people to do so, that would be absolutely fab. Because if people like you are saying this is what we want, then there's much more chance it'll be heard. Thank you very much.